We thoroughly enjoy a cheating scandal here at AM Glimpse. We've covered the Spanish Paralympic basketball team who faked their disabilities to win gold, Rosie Ruiz who came in first in the Boston Marathon after she jumped on the subway and skipped most of the run, and Charles Ingram, the coughing major who won Who Wants to Be a Millionaire with a little help from the sidelines. There have been countless audacious individuals and teams across major sports and niche competitions who risked it all just to win. Doping, faking, fixing, tampering, spying, and hand-of-godding their way to glory and fortune. These stories will live on in infamy forever, but today we're going to get into some of the weirder and wackier cheating scandals that you may not have heard of. So if you live in Australia or any country where the sport cricket is a big deal, you actually would have heard about this, but it is a weird one. In Cape Town, March 2018, during Australia's test match against South Africa, the cameras caught Australian player Cameron Bancroft pulling something out of his pocket, holding it in his palm and rubbing it on the ball. Realizing he was being shown on the big screen, he panicked, then proceeded to hide a small yellow object down the front of his pants. But the cameras and umpires saw the whole thing. Head coach Darren Lehman looked on from his box in disbelief. Did one of his players really just try to ball tamper? In other words, cheat? When Cameron Bancroft was confronted by umpires, he tried to cover up what he had done by showing them that a black sunglasses pouch was the only thing in his pocket. The umpires didn't buy it. They knew he had rubbed the cricket ball with the yellow foreign object. He came clean with team captain Steve Smith standing beside him. It was actually a piece of sticky tape that had been torn off some padding equipment. He had stuck bits of sand and dirt from the ground to it. He then used it to scuff up one side of the ball, either to force a swing when the ball is bowled to confuse the batter, or to damage it enough to get a replacement ball brought in. Reports on what they were trying to achieve vary. But one thing was for certain, the Australian cricket team had just cheated and were caught red-handed. The umpires inspected the ball and decided it hadn't been altered enough to need replacing. Play continued, but a very dark cloud now hovered over the Aussies and they ended up losing the series. Cameron Bancroft was charged with ball tampering. In the press conference later that day, team captain Steve Smith admitted that the plan had been cooked up ahead of time by the leadership group, but the coaches and managers had zero involvement. Smith didn't seem to realize at the time just how big of a deal this would become. He said he just wanted to move on and expressed that he had no intention of stepping down as captain. That choice wasn't really up to him though. The scandal rocked Australia. Cricket fans felt betrayed and ashamed. Non-cricket fans embarrassed but a little amused. Plenty of cricket fans around the world believed this was not the first time Australia had cheated and that they were only sorry that they got caught. It is pretty crazy that the players thought they'd get away with sandpapering the ball on a field with over 100 cameras pointing at them, most of which had extreme slow-mo and zoom capabilities. Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull even publicly expressed his disappointment and asked Cricket Australia to investigate and take action. Cameron Bancroft was banned from playing cricket for 9 months. Captain Steve Smith and Vice Captain David Warner were both stripped of their roles and banned from cricket for 12 months. The investigation revealed that David Warner was the one who came up with the plan and enlisted the younger, more junior Cameron Bancroft to carry out the ball tampering. Just a few weeks before sandpapergate, David Warner nearly got into a physical fight with a South African player who allegedly made inappropriate comments about his wife. Head coach Darren Lehman, who was cleared of any involvement or wrongdoing, resigned shortly after the incident. It's no secret that soccer players feign and exaggerate their falls and injuries in an effort to win their team penalties. But in September 1989, Chilean goalkeeper Roberto Rojas took it to a whole other level. It was a FIFA World Cup qualifier, and Chile was down against Brazil 0-1 in the second half. The last game between the rivals a month ago had been explosive. Players exchanged heated words and very rough tackles, resulting in 2 red cards and several more yellow, with a final score of 1-1. The pressure was now on for Chile to win this game in order to qualify for the 1990 World Cup. In the 68th minute of play, the game was suddenly stopped. A rogue flare had been thrown onto the pitch by one of the 140,000 spectators and appeared to have hit Chilean goalkeeper Roberto Rojas. The goalie was on the ground, writhing around in agony, surrounded by smoke, his face covered in blood. His teammates clamored around him, gesturing for medical help before carrying him off the pitch. Almost all of the Chileans had walked off, and after a confusing 20 minutes, the referees had to end the game. There was no footage of the flare hitting Rojas. Photographers on the sidelines rushed back to their labs to develop their film to check if they had gotten a clear shot of the moment of impact. Luckily, photographer Riccardo Alfieri had captured 4 clear shots of the flare flying through the air, then landing a full meter away from Rojas. If he hadn't been hit by the flare, why was he bleeding so profusely that night? 2 days later, a medical report was released. It stated that Rojas did not have any burn marks, only a cut on the left side of his forehead. After a few days of questioning, Rojas confessed it was a self-inflicted cut. He used a razor blade that he had hidden in his goalie glove. The team doctor and one of the managers had cooked up the plan well ahead of time. Rojas was to cut himself and pretend he was badly injured so the game could be stopped and abandoned if things weren't going well. The Brazilian home crowd had been rowdy during the game, tossing bottles and fruit onto the pitch. So when a lit flare landed a meter away from him, Rojas saw this as an opportunity to make the Brazilians look bad and force a rematch or even a disqualification. He threw himself on the grass, rolled around in the smoke, sneakily took the razor blade out of his glove and cut his own forehead. After the truth came out, FIFA awarded Brazil a 2-0 win, while Chile was disqualified from the 1990 World Cup as well as the next one in 1994. Roberto Rojas was given a lifetime ban that was eventually lifted in 2001. Several others on the Chilean squad were given suspensions, including the coach Orlando Aravena, captain Fernando Estengo, team doctor Daniel Rodriguez, as well as president of the Football Federation of Chile, Sergio Stoppel. The Brazilian fan who threw the flare was a 24-year-old woman named Rosenery de Nascimento. She was arrested a few days after the game and fined $12,000, but went on to become a minor celebrity and even grace the cover of Brazilian Playboy magazine. In April 2009, English rugby player Tom Williams put on his own bloody display to force an advantage for his team. It was the quarter-final of the Heineken Cup, a European rugby union tournament. It was the English team Harlequins against the Irish team Leinster. The Harlequins were down 1 point with just 5 minutes left in the game. Harlequins head coach Dean Richards wanted to bring star goal kicker Nick Evans, who had gone off with an injury, back onto the field for one last goal attempt. The only way to sub an injured player back on was in the event of what's called a blood injury. The Harlequins physio, Steph Brennan, ran onto the pitch and handed 25-year-old winger Tom Williams a small capsule of fake blood. Go into contact, put this in your mouth, chew it, and go down. We'll get you off, Brennan instructed. So Williams did exactly that. He got himself tackled, knelt down, took the blood capsule out of his sock, popped it into his mouth, and bit down. With blood dripping out of his mouth, he feigned an injury, got the attention of the referees, and was allowed to be subbed off and replaced by Nick Evans. While walking off the pitch, Williams gave one of his teammates a wink to indicate that he was okay, a move that would get misconstrued and become infamous in the aftermath. The timing of it all was a little too convenient. Even the commentators remarked that Tom Williams must have punched himself. Plus, Nick Evans had been seen warming up just minutes before the blood appeared. Staff on the Leinster side were immediately suspicious and confronted Harlequins head coach Dean Richards. Evans was set up with a chance to score a last-minute goal, but he kicked the ball wide and the Harlequins lost. After the game ended, it was chaos. The Leinster squad were yelling that it was fake blood. Tom Williams and the team's matchday doctor, Wendy Chapman, had locked themselves in the change room in panic. Tournament officials were banging on the door, demanding to see Williams' supposed injury. Williams begged Dr. Chapman to cut his lip for real, threatening to do it himself if she didn't. The doctor had nothing to do with the blood capsule, but she didn't want to risk Williams causing himself serious harm, so she pulled out a scalpel and made a small incision in his lip. The months following Bloodgate were just as dramatic. Williams was initially suspended for 12 months and the club was fined £215,000. Head coach Dean Richards was banned for 3 years, physio Steph Brennan copped a 2-year ban, and Dr. Wendy Chapman was suspended for a year by the General Medical Council. Williams wanted to appeal his ban and sought legal counsel. his club urged him to not appeal and tried to bribe him with payments, job offers, and extra holidays. While Williams weighed up his options, Dean Richards and club chairman Charles Gillings both resigned from the Harlequins, and William decided to come clean to the tournament organisers. He exposed his club, revealing that fake blood capsules had been used many times before in the past. His ban was reduced to 4 months and he remained with the club. Tunisia wasn't having a great run in the 1960 Summer Olympics in Rome. Their 3-man modern pentathlon team, Vladka Buzid, Habib Ben Azabi, and Ahmed Enachi, was struggling. The event consists of 5 sports: pistol shooting, swimming, equestrian show jumping, cross-country running, and fencing. So competitors need to be a bit of a jack of all trades to do well. During the shooting, one of the Tunisians was disqualified after nearly hitting a judge. In swimming, one of them was floundering so badly he needed to be rescued by a lifeguard, not a common occurrence at the Olympics. Then in the equestrian jumping, all 3 of them were thrown off their horses and scored 0 points. By the final sport, fencing, Tunisia was coming dead last, but they had one last Hail Mary. One of the team members was actually really good at fencing. Since fencers have to wear a helmet that completely covers the face, the team decided to send out the really good guy multiple times, pretending to be his other teammates. He actually fooled the officials for a few bouts and performed well, but they were eventually found out and disqualified. 24 years later, another Olympic imposter would attempt to compete for gold. Madeline de Jesus was ecstatic to be competing in athletics for Puerto Rico at the 1984 Los Angeles Olympics. Long jump was her first event. She came 21st but pulled her hamstring in the process, meaning she would not be able to compete in her next event, the 4x400 meter relay, in 6 days. Instead of dropping out and forcing her team to forfeit, she hatched a plan with a little trick up her sleeve. Her identical twin sister Margaret, who had flown to LA as a spectator to support Madeline. Margaret was a sprinter as well, but missed out on qualifying for the Puerto Rican relay team. So Margaret pretended to be Madeline and ran with the team in the heats. They ended up in 8th place, qualifying for the finals. However, once their coach, Francisco Colonelares, found out about the ruse, he pulled the team out of the competition before anyone could figure out what happened. An eagle-eyed Puerto Rican journalist noticed that the young woman who had just raced was missing a mole on her cheek. He put 2 and 2 together and exposed the De Jesus sisters. The Puerto Rican Olympic Committee handed out lifetime bans to both Madeline and Margaret, as well as the team's coach, even though he denied being in on the ploy. The 3 other relay team members were given 1-year suspensions. Despite this, Madeline went on to compete in the long jump again at the 1988 Summer Olympics in Mexico City. Horse racing, cornhole, and fishing, some of America's favorite pastimes, and all sports that saw some odd cheating attempts. It was a particularly foggy day on the 11th of January 1990 at Louisiana's Delta Downs horse racing track. The fog was so heavy that part of the track was completely obscured when viewed from a distance. That day, jockey Sylvester Carmouche was due to race 5-year-old Landing Officer in a mile-long race. As the 9 horses in the race lined up at the starting gate, nobody expected Landing Officer to win. He was a 23-1 long shot. The horses took off, then disappeared into the fog. They reappeared a few seconds later as they all ran past the crowd, before fading into the thick mist again. Suddenly, Landing Officer broke through out of nowhere, out in front by 24 lengths. He crossed the finish line first, just 1.2 seconds off the track record. The crowd was stunned, but the other jockeys were livid and immediately challenged Sylvester Carmouche's win. The tape was reviewed, and sure enough, only 8 horses had gone past the stands the first time. "The camera must have missed my horse," Carmouche said. He claimed that Landing Officer had been leading the race way out in front from the start, but obviously nobody saw that happen. The jockey who finished second said he never saw any horse pass him. Landing Officer wasn't breathing heavy at the end of the race, and his legs were clean and not splattered with mud like the other horses. It soon became clear that Carmouche had stopped his horse in the middle of the race and hid in the thick fog, waited for the other horses to go by, then rejoined the race for the last stretch, bursting out of the fog in first place. Sylvester Carmouche was handed a 10-year ban from racing in Louisiana, but it was lifted after 8 years. He was also fined, charged with attempted theft, and was sentenced to 30 days in prison. So it turns out, people will cheat at pretty much anything when there's prize money involved, including fishing. In 1984, 4 Louisiana fishermen admitted to importing live bass from Florida, then pretending to catch them in Texas fishing tournaments and fraudulently won a total of $350,000 in prizes. They all pleaded guilty and received a 5-year prison sentence and fines. In 2012, Englishman Matthew Clark broke into a local aquarium and stole a large bass, then took it to a tournament to pretend that he caught it. He was planning to sneak it back into the aquarium, but accidentally killed it. Clark was sentenced to 100 hours of community service. In 2020, Brent Taylor of Texas was caught using a chopped off fishtail to make his catch look larger. This particular tournament required anglers to submit photos of their bass placed on an approved measuring board. Taylor placed the severed tail further back on his fish and used his hand to strategically cover the overlap. He was busted after officials became suspicious of his photo and searched his boat. In September 2022, the most infamous and shocking cheating scandal in fishing went down. Jake Runyan from Ohio and Chase Cominsky from Pennsylvania were one of the most dominant teams in the world of walleye fishing. They encountered a blip at the end of 2021 when they were disqualified from a tournament after they failed a polygraph test that determined they had cheated, costing them $120,000. But they adamantly denied ever cheating. Runyan was quoted on Cleveland.com, "Our reputation means the world to us, and we would never cheat." Fast forward a few months, and Runyan and Cominsky have won 3 tournaments in a row on the Lake Erie Walleye Trail. Their fellow anglers were suspicious, but nobody could prove that they had cheated. It's the 30th of September. Runyan and Cominsky had just won their final tournament of the year and would pocket $28,000 in prize money. When tournament director Jason Fisher declared that they had the heaviest catch of the day, nobody in the audience seemed excited. There was no applause, just mutters of disbelief. Almost silence as the winners held up their victorious catch for photos. It was clear something was not right. Just by looking at the fish, nobody believed that they were as heavy as the number displayed on the scale. Jason Fisher asked to take another look at the fish. Runyan reluctantly handed his bag of fish over. The atmosphere was tense as Jason Fisher looked for a knife to cut open the fish. Then,
"We got weights and fish!
There we go!
every single one of their fish had been stuffed with weights and fish fillets. Altogether, they had added 7 pounds to the catch. Jake Runyan just stood there with his head hung down in shame, taking the verbal abuse being hurled at him by the other competitors. Chase Cominsky was nowhere to be seen. Police were called, and Runyan and Cominsky were eventually charged with cheating, attempted grand theft, and possessing criminal tools, and a misdemeanor count of illegal animal ownership. They pleaded guilty and were each sentenced to 10 days in prison and ordered to pay a $2,500 fine. They also had to forfeit their $130,000 boat and had their fishing licenses suspended for 3 years. That wasn't it for these 2 upstanding citizens though. Jake Runyan was later separately charged with domestic violence and unlawful restraint. Chase Cominsky was accused of stalking and harassment of his ex-wife, then faced a new charge of conspiracy after knowingly giving his son counterfeit money to use at a bowling alley. His 18-year-old son was charged with forgery, counterfeiting, conspiracy, and theft by deception. A year later, Cominsky was exposed as a deer poacher after it was discovered that several of his mounted deer heads were harvested out of season and on a suspended hunting license. Somehow, the very public humiliation of Runyan and Cominsky was not enough to deter Peter Smith from cheating in almost the exact same way in the Bart's Cove Walleye Duel in Dunkirk, New York in July 2023. The grand prize was an all-inclusive Panama fishing trip valued at $14,500. Peter Smith wanted it so badly he stuffed his fish with smaller fish to make his catch heavier. He was caught in the act and banned from ever participating in fishing events in New York State for life. Our next story takes place in South Carolina in August 2022. at the American Cornhole League World Championships. Yes, that's a thing. For those unfamiliar, the game is essentially tossing a beanbag into a hole in a wooden board, but it's clearly gained a lot of popularity outside of just backyard barbecues. The American Cornhole League now has over 150,000 members and puts on thousands of events around the US every year. According to the Wall Street Journal, top pro players earn up to $250,000 a year from prize money, sponsors, and endorsements. With stakes this high, it's not surprising players have started manipulating their beanbags to gain an edge over the competition. Bags need to be a certain size and weight, but apparently techniques like boiling the bags in vinegar or washing them with fabric softener have become common and are completely within the rules. However, at the 2022 World Championships, baggate rocked the cornhole community. It all started during a doubles game, when professional cornholer Devin Harbaugh made a complaint about his opponents Mark Richards and Philip Lopez, the number one ranked doubles team at the time. Harbaugh believed that the other team's beanbags were smaller than regulation. Officials measured the bags, and sure enough, they were too thin. A thinner bag means it can glide through the air and fall through the hole easier. Lopez and Richards then turned it around and requested that their opponent's bags be checked. Lo and behold, Devin Harbaugh and his teammate Derek King's bags were also too small. An hour later, officials determined that the infractions were honest mistakes and not intentional. The ACL has since cracked down on beanbag compliance and has started to invest more into the sport's infrastructure. Chess has quite a checkered past when it comes to weird cheating attempts, going back all the way to 1770, when German inventor Wolfgang von Kempelen created a mechanical device that could beat any human at a game of chess. It featured a mannequin dressed in Ottoman clothing that would move chess pieces in a very lifelike way. The machine, which eventually became known as the Turk, changed ownership over the decades and toured the world, challenging strong chess players and beating them. It won against notable people like Napoleon Bonaparte and Benjamin Franklin. For 84 years, the Turk dazzled 18th and 19th century audiences until it was destroyed in a fire. The son of one of its owners published an article revealing that the whole thing had been an elaborate hoax. There was a human being inside the machine the whole time, controlling the movements. Several different chess masters over the years secretly sat inside the cabinet, operating a series of levers to control the Turk's arm. Accusations of collusion and match fixing in professional tournaments have been thrown around for decades, while in more casual arenas like public parks, sleight of hand tricks have been used to cheat. 1978's World Chess Championship became infamous for the mind games between the two finalists, Anatoly Karpov and Viktor Korchnoi. Sunglasses with mirrored lenses, a custom chair was x-rayed, there were accusations of hypnosis, a handshake refusal, yogurt that contained a secret code, and in one player's entourage were yoga teachers who were out on bail for attempted murder. This match really had it all, but nobody was strictly cheating. In 1993, an unrated, unknown player who used the alias John von Neumann managed to win 4 games at the World Open. He was wearing headphones and had some sort of device in his pocket that would occasionally buzz. His opponents reported him and he was busted after he failed to answer questions about basic chess rules. To this day, we still don't know who this mysterious fellow was. More recently, mobile phones have become a common way to cheat amongst chess pros. In 2010, 3 French players and their coach were given suspensions for their elaborate scheme. The coach was texting a player who was at home using a computer to determine the best moves. The coach would then sit or stand in specific ways to signal to the players in the competition particular moves. Over the next few years, several others would get caught consulting their mobile phones that were hidden in the bathroom ahead of time. But the scandal that rocked the chess world and made mainstream news headlines was between grandmasters Magnus Carlsen and Hans Niemann. It started on the 4th of September 2022 at the Singfield Cup in Missouri. World champion Magnus Carlsen, who is widely considered to be the greatest chess player of all time, had just been unexpectedly defeated in the 3rd round by the lowest ranked competitor, Hans Niemann. His 53-game unbeaten streak had just ended. Carlsen then dropped out of the tournament, the first time he had ever withdrawn from a major event, and just something rarely ever done at elite level chess. He didn't explain why he dropped out, nor did he outright accuse Niemann of cheating, but he later tweeted out a video that implied something was dodgy. Over the next few days, the chess community scrutinized Niemann's past. Former world number 2 chess player Hikaru Nakamura remarked in a live stream that Carlsen most likely suspected Niemann was cheating. Chess.com published a 72-page report detailing evidence of Niemann's cheating in over 100 online chess games in the past, then deleted his account. Niemann admitted that he had indeed used computer programs to cheat in online chess, but only when he was 12 years old, then again at 16 when there was no prize money at stake, but denied ever cheating in an over-the-board game. His ELO rating, chess skill level rating, had also increased incredibly fast in just a couple of years. Theories about vibrating sex toys hidden up his bum began to spread on social media. Back in July, programmer James Stanley had blogged about creating a vibrating device that could communicate with a chess engine while remaining hidden in his shoe. He had created this device in the name of science, of course, but it added fuel to the theory that Niemann had used a hidden vibrating device to cheat. In response to these theories, Niemann said,
"They want me to strip fully naked? I'll do it. I don't care because I know that I'm clean. And you want me to play in a closed box with zero electric transmission? I don't care, you know."
Despite all this, there was no concrete evidence that he had cheated during that Singfield Cup game against Magnus Carlsen. On the 19th of September 2022, just 2 weeks after their encounter at the Singfield Cup, Carlsen and Niemann were to play in the online tournament Julius Baer Generation Cup, which boasted a prize pool of $140,000. Niemann played the first move of the highly anticipated rematch. Carlsen made his first move, then immediately resigned from the game and disconnected from the whole thing, once again without warning or explanation.
d4, knight f6, c4, yeah, definitely. And what? No.
What happened? What?
No. What happened? That's it?
Magnus Carlsen just resigned, got up and left.
1 week later, Magnus Carlsen posted his official statement on Twitter and straight up accused Hans Niemann of cheating. His over-the-board progress has been unusual, and throughout our game in the Singfield Cup, I had the impression that he wasn't tense or even fully concentrating on the game in critical positions, Carlsen stated. 1 month later, Niemann filed a federal defamation lawsuit against Magnus Carlsen, Carlsen's company Play Magnus Group, Chess.com, and its chief of chess, Danny Wrench, along with chess grandmaster and streamer Hikaru Nakamura. Niemann was seeking $100 million in damages, but a US judge dismissed the lawsuit in June 2023. In August, Chess.com announced that all parties had resolved their issues and agreed to move on, then reinstated Niemann's account. If chess is something you're interested in or you just want to come and have a chat, I stream chess live at twitch.tv/leadelbow. Thank you so much for watching this video.